Good evening, everyone. I think we'll get started here. Welcome, members of the public. Just apologies, we're a few minutes late. We had an in-camera session before, and it went a few minutes over. So I will call to order we're going to have a few different meetings again, which happens on these first Tuesdays of the month. I'm going to begin by calling to order the Planning Board meeting of May 2nd, 2023, here at 5:20 p.m. I'll call for a motion from Councillor Snow here for approval of the agenda, second from Councillor Duran. All in favor of the agenda as presented. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, we will proceed with the agenda as proposed for the Planning Board meeting. Conflict of interest declaration. Any councillor with a conflict on any of the matters before you this evening? Hearing none, we will move forward. As always, we do a land acknowledgement. We'll do one land acknowledgement tonight that will cover 3 of the meetings. We acknowledge that the land upon which we gather is the unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abagway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. Land acknowledgement is a small but meaningful way of showing respect and honoring the indigenous peoples of the land where we live. We'll move this meeting now over to Councillor Duran for items 5 and 6. The first, the recommendation for 674 Water Street East zoning amendment. Just to the members of the public, this first meeting is a Planning Board meeting. There are 4 members of Planning Board: Councillor Morrison, Councillor Snow, Councillor Duran, and myself, although all council is here with the opportunity to present comments and questions and things. But in terms of voting at the end, that's why you won't see some councillors vote at that point in time. Councillor?
Great, thank you. It's a little early to be muted. So this is our second, I guess, of 3 meetings with regards to this specific application. The first meeting was an opportunity for public to ask questions and council to ask questions and staff to hear those, and so staff have prepared some answers to those questions, and tonight is the night where we will go through that report, and we will, I guess the Planning Board will either recommend or not recommend that it goes to council, but whether it's recommended or not from the Planning Board, it is going to council for a final decision. So whatever happens tonight, just keep in mind that it is going to council, and that will be on 3rd Monday of May. Not quite sure what it is off the top of my head, but that's when the actual decision will be made on this matter. So we'll go through the recommendation, the report this evening, and we'll go from there. I'm sorry, May 15th. Okay, and usually they're at 6. They'll be at 6:30. So first item, 674 Water Street East zoning amendment. Supporting explanation. Purpose of the zoning amendment is to allow multi-unit buildings such as row housing or apartments. Background: an application was received from Strategic Holdings Inc., Nathan Kember, for a portion of PID number 73536 and a portion of PID number 72421 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone. A public meeting was held on April 26th, 2023, and council gave first reading on the same date. Report: under section 5.7 of the zoning bylaw, when Planning Board reviews a zoning bylaw amendment, it has to consider the following general criteria as applicable. A, conformity with all requirements of this bylaw. Staff comment: any proposed development can or will conform to the R4 development standards. B, conformity with the official plan. Staff comment: the application conforms to the official plan as the subject properties are designated as residential land use on the future land use plan. See Schedule B of the official plan for that future land use plan. The proposed amendments have no impact on the Parks and Green Space plan. C, suitability of the site for the proposed development. Staff comment: the site is suitable for high-density residential land use. Streets and municipal services in the area are available to make connections for a proposed development. D, compatibility with the proposed development with surrounding land uses, including both existing and projected uses. Staff comment: portion of PID number 73536 The land to the west and east are designated as residential land uses. The land use to the north is commercial, and the land use to the south is conservation. For the portion of PID number 72421, the land use to the west, east, and north are designated as residential land uses. The land use to the south is conservation. E, any comments from residents or other interested persons? Staff comment, a public meeting was held on April 27th, 2023. The public meeting notice was advertised in the April 15th edition of The Guardian. 10 letters were mailed to 12 property owners. The applicant was not in attendance. Staff displayed a concept plan that has been submitted by the applicant. Randy Petrie, 280 Keppoch Road, spoke at the meeting regarding the property owner's business name, business registration, and legal matters, and cautioned the city should seek legal advice when considering an application from this property owner. Krista Hickey spoke at the meeting, 382 Hunter Avenue, and she also owns 702 Water Street East. She supported the property being developed as high-density residential. Mike Martin, 705 Water Street East, spoke regarding concerns of the development plan being presented at the public meeting and not being included in the public notification process. Mr. Martin raised concerns regarding the amount of traffic from potential developments on the subject properties, which would create, and the impact of the additional traffic on the already busy Water Street East. Mr. Martin asked if there is a cost comparison developing low-density residential compared to high-density residential. No written comments were received regarding this application, aside from Mr. Petrie's submissions regarding legal matters regarding the applicant name/business. F, adequacy of existing water, sewer, road, stormwater, and electrical services, city parking, and parklands for accommodating the development and any projected infrastructure requirements. Staff comment, the city's water supply and sewer treatment systems can handle the additional loading created by the change in zoning. Rezoning this development from R1 to R4 increases the loading on the Eustain Street lift station by less than 1% of the calculated future loading for the entire drainage basin. The city does not see this as a significant load change, therefore there is no expectation of the developer contributing to an upgrading of the Eustain Street lift station. Water Street has a 250 millimeter distribution main on the north side of Water Street that can handle the water requirements for this change in zoning. The city's sewer main infrastructure for this development is a 450 millimeter gravity trunk main that is to the north of the proposed development. Connection of this development into this system is to be at a manhole, or a manhole will have to be installed as part of this development. The developer will have to ensure there is enough grade for gravity sewer, or the developer will have to pump the sewage into the system. Water and sewer servicing costs are the same, whether for low-density R1 or high-density R4, as costs are per meter of road mains. Water supply and sewer treatment costs would be increased based on the higher density housing constructed with higher number of tenants per square area. The subject properties will access onto Water Street East via a public street. Water Street East is a collector street constructed to city standards with a sidewalk on the south side of the street. The traffic counts on this portion of Water Street East are approximately 18,000 vehicles per day. The theoretical capacity of Water Street East is 25,000 vehicles per day. Water Street East can accommodate the anticipated traffic for the rezoning from R1 to R4. The development's internal road network and drainage will be reviewed upon submission of a building and/or development permit. There is 3-phase electrical service available in the area. G, impacts from the development on pedestrian or vehicular access and safety, and on public safety generally. Staff comment, proposed accesses are not directly on Water Street East. The subject properties will be accessed via a public street from Water Street East at the intersection of Gillespie Avenue. There is a sidewalk located on the south side of Water Street East for pedestrians. H, compatibility of the development with environmental, scenic, and heritage resources. Staff comments, city staff are aware of potential environmental concerns as a portion of the subject properties is designated as conservation and a drainage basin low area is located on the properties. The property owner or developer will be required to have the environmental area delineated by the Department of Environment and shown on proposed site plans upon submission for development. I, impacts on city finances and budgets. Staff comment, not applicable. J, other matters as specified in this bylaw, and there are none. K, other matters as considered relevant. Staff comment, the concept plan shown at the public meeting was a concept only. In the past, council has requested the applicant provide a concept plan. Staff have noted that concept plans can be perceived as the application when in fact the application is a zoning amendment. The applicant can propose any use in the proposed zone, and development layouts or designs are subject to change. The development layout, the access, building locations, etc., is reviewed upon submission of a building or development permit. The purpose of the public notification, which are the media ad and the letters, is to make property owners aware of the meeting date and time and the application, i.e. rezoning, restricted use, etc. City staff have not reviewed any specific development for the subject properties. Police Services did a review 2018 to 2023 of motor vehicle accidents in the area, Water Street East from Furniture Gallery to Sunny Isle Motel. Police Services reported a total of 12 accidents and 1 failed to remain in the 5-year period. The traffic counts on this portion of Water Street East are approximately 18,000 vehicles per day. As part of the East-West Connector design and review, a future signalized intersection at Water Street East would be reviewed as part of the design. As the subject properties are developed, the intersection of Water Street East and Gillespie Avenue will be reviewed. The relative concerns raised are addressed throughout this report. Mr. Pittry's concerns have been forwarded to the city's legal counsel for their consideration. Recommendation, city staff supports the application from Strategic Holdings, Inc., Nathan Kember, for a portion of PID number 73536 and a portion of PID number 72421 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone, be recommended to be approved by council. As per section 5.10, section B3 of the zoning bylaw, the planning board shall make a recommendation to council on this application before it is approved or denied. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. Planning board recommendation, the application from Strategic Holdings, Inc., Nathan Kember, for a portion of PID number 73536 and a portion of PID number 72421 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone bears the recommendation of the planning board. So before the planning board votes to take this to council, I guess I will ask CAO Gordon, where it mentions that Mr. Pittry's concerns have been forwarded to the city's legal counsel for their consideration. Was there a response or any feedback from that?
Yeah, staff have talked to external legal counsel on these concerns and reviewed with council, and we are comfortable that for the process that we're responsible for in the area that we regulate, we're comfortable with our process.
So I guess just as clarification, and I know we spoke about it just before the meeting, the vote, I keep calling it a vote, it's not a decision tonight, but tonight and the next meeting, or just the next meeting, this is a decision based on the use of the land and not to do with developers or landowners or anything, just we're deciding on the use of the land. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
Councillor Adams, Councillor MacDougall.
I just had 2 quick questions. So on G, where it says proposed accesses are not directly on Water Street East, so that really doesn't change the fact that you're still going to have the same amount of vehicles coming out. They're just going to be emptying out on one as opposed to a couple different ones, correct? Okay, and where it says, as part of the East-West Connector design/review, future signalized intersection at Water Street East will be reviewed as part of the design. Would that be like Water Street East and then wherever the connector comes out would be? Okay. All right.
As part of that project, they'll be looking when the connection comes out to Water Street East, reviewing what has to happen at that intersection, whether it's additional lanes or turning lanes or signals or what have you.
Right, perfect, thank you.
Councillor MacDougall, Deputy Mayor Snow.
Yeah. Thank you. More of a comment, I guess, instead of a question, but in H, compatibility of the development, environmental, scenic, and heritage resources, it states that the city is aware of environmental concerns. It's strange to me that if there's concerns around an environmental area, why the environmental issue is not looked at first before somebody would go ahead and with a rezoning and a development plan or all that. So I don't know if that's a question or a concern. So thank you.
I guess we're noting that these, I don't know if we want to go one of the maps there, Linda. There are portions of these properties that are being rezoned. There's portions to the south that we've identified on our overall zoning map to be conservation. We don't determine the limits of exactly where that is. That's taken off of other mapping. Whenever the Department of Environment or a developer goes to look at that property, they will define exactly that limit and incorporate that onto that. So we're just noting that there is a conservation area, to our knowledge, on this property. It's to be defined at a future date when they go to develop or finalize an actual concept or a development.
May I just make a comment more than a question again with number H? I just want to check from memory. When we've had other applications in, if there has been any environmental awareness or around the development, I think that is something also, usually in those applications that comes forward, that the potential developer has that responsibility to make sure that all things are being followed around that environmental area. Yes? No?
I think this is our standard response, that if we know there's shore frontage or a water course going through it that's identified in our mapping, we just highlight it to the landowner when they're coming forward to make sure that that gets clearly defined, or they're not realizing that they go in with it with the full idea and get too far along before the full lengths or limits of scope get determined what's developable and what's not. Again, this is the rezoning, and that rezoning boundary will adjust, and the conservation area will adjust based on the actual, they call it the delineation on the ground of what's buildable area and what's not.
Okay. No.
We're not the people that do that. We just incorporate that onto our mapping after it's delineated, and typically the developer surveyor picks up those marks with the Department of Environment as they walk the property with either the landowner or themselves and physically mark the land.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just making the comment, Director Aaron, just to point out to our residents who may be here in the gallery or listening, that is part of the process that council follows. If there are environmental areas in the application, then it's a standard part of the process that is mentioned to the developer.
Yes, as well as mentioned, like I say, those are the same criteria for every rezoning, and number 8 says compatibility development with the environmental resources. So we'd be saying, is there any environmental resources in the vicinity or abutting this property? It's a standard procedure for us.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
Thank you, Aaron and staff. So a lot of the questions I had was already asked, but I agree with Bruce that it'd be nice to know some of those environmental risks, specifically as if there was significant ones, but I understand that's the process we've always followed. And then I did have a question around legal advice, but just to add to that, so we met here last Wednesday, the 26th, on this matter. We're now the following Tuesday. Does staff feel that with all the questions, comments, things raised from that meeting, that we were able to get the answers needed to bring back to staff? So, like, during that meeting, there was tons of either comments made that are correct or incorrect, or statements by the public. As one councillor, am I confident, or can I be confident in saying that staff brought back to me the answers I need to make this decision?
So I guess I'd answer that by saying there are certain areas of regulation that we're responsible for, and in the areas that we are responsible for, we're comfortable, after speaking with our external legal counsel, that our process is correct. And yeah, I guess that's what I'd say. I mean, I wasn't at the meeting, I read through the minutes. There were a number of concerns raised that, in my opinion, have nothing to do with this rezoning application. They may or may not be valid, but they're not, in my opinion, for consideration for this rezoning application. And we've had that discussion previously with our external legal counsel.
Previously, but since that meeting, have we had the discussion with legal counsel externally whether or not any of the concerns brought forward that night should bear in our decision? So since we were done here Wednesday, has anybody chatted with legal to say, we had a meeting Wednesday night, public meeting?
Yeah.
What I would consider to be some significant concerns, if true, and if they do bear any weight on our decision, or should, we probably should get those answers. I guess I'm asking, is anything brought forward publicly at that Wednesday meeting, should any of that bear into our decision to proceed with rezoning this? So if we haven't talked to legal since Wednesday to say, we've received a complaint about this, here's what we heard, does council have any concern with moving forward? Are we putting the city at any risk? I just think
I'm comfortable in advising that I think our risk level is quite reasonable.
Okay, thank you. And just one last comment. So, it's more. This is a statement. I really dislike the fact that we have a project that is pretty significant sitting in front of us. And we had a rezoning, the last planning board from the exact same applicant, and he hasn't been here for either one. And Linda brought it up the last time that it's not very common for an applicant not to come forward. I can not think of too many since I've been here. I've only been here 4 years, but it's been very few, if any, that somebody hasn't sort of accompanied their application to the city to say, hey, this is what I hope to do, here's what I'm doing, this is who I am. Not that I don't know the person, but I think there's a process that needs to take place. And that should be not necessarily a criteria, but it definitely, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right, so I just had to say that.
And I agree absolutely with everything that you just said, the whole thing. Anytime. I certainly wasn't comfortable coming into this. I wasn't comfortable or prepared to be able to make that recommendation to go to council unless I could be, unless it was determined that the third-party legal counsel kind of gave us the green light to do so. So since they did, I'm certainly okay to carry forward into the next part of the process, which is the next council meeting. It's still not the time that we're here to make a decision, so I'm going to take, as we all will, whether this is recommended or not this evening, the next couple of weeks to continue gathering information and whatnot. But I think the points that you made were just spot on. There were a lot of things to consider, and I wasn't prepared to go forward without the legal green light to do so.
With that being said, I wonder if it's possible. Could we get something back from external legal just sort of stating that they feel, based on the information that we should go over, should be using to determining the rezoning, that we're within our means, that, because the last thing, I'll put this on the record, the last thing I want is for us to make a decision and sometime after the fact somebody come back and say you guys were totally hoodwinked, or you shouldn't have processed that, you shouldn't move forward, whatever it is. So if we could get something just saying we're okay to proceed, then that'd be great.
Thanks, Councillor. I have a couple questions for staff. First, one of the requirements is for us to look at surrounding land uses. So the adjacent property to the east that is delineated in white, what's the zoning for that property?
That's zoned residential, it's R1, it's residential land use.
That's R1. And then the property to the north, it's the R4 with the entryway there to Water Street. East, is that the property that Councillor Snow was talking about that was recently rezoned to R4 or not?
One to the right of that, I believe, maybe. Which one was just, the
Okay.
previous one that was
This one here where I have my
Okay,
little hand on, this one here.
okay, yeah, I'm curious about the bigger parcel to the south. That one.
This parcel to the south was
Yeah.
rezoned, I believe, in 2019,
Okay.
or the spring of 2020.
And is that the same, was it the same applicant, the same owner there?
Yes, yeah,
You know, we often,
it's part of the same property.
right, but I know, Director Aaron, we often talk about wanting to see everything come together in one package as opposed to bits and pieces. So, one other quick question, one of the requirements for us to consider under 5.7 of the zoning bylaws, compatibility of the proposed development. I'm assuming that really should read proposed zoning, since we're not looking at a specific development, right? It's D, 5.7D on your second page. Compatibility to proposed development with surrounding land use, including existing and projected uses.
So land use is a little bit different than zoning. So land use is our future land use plan, and we don't specifically say it's high-density land, we say it's residential land. So it's all residential, so it conforms with the official plan that he is proposing to move it from R1 to R4, so that meets official plan.
Yeah,
conforms
my
with
point is just proposed development. We don't look at it from a development perspective, right? We look at it from a land use
that.
perspective.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. I certainly also have some, my concerns are probably a little bit different in terms of development. I'm obviously a huge advocate for housing and that we need more and more housing here, but I often also say across the spectrum. So I think sometimes you want to make sure I think you have sort of step back housing, which I've seen other developments come forward and people come forward with, where you would have R4 closer to the road and then step back to your R3 or R3R and your R2 and some R1. But if this is all zoned R4, there's no potential, there could be no step back. It could just be R4 all the way down to the water and then to the east to the R1.
It could be, but all the uses in the R4 zone allow all R1, R2, and R3, but they're fully within their right to do all R4.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, those are all my questions.
Okay, so I will just reread the planning board recommendation here into the minutes, and we'll carry on. The application from Planning Board recommendation, the application from Strategic Holdings, Inc., Nathan Kember, for a portion of PID number 73536 and a portion of PID number 72421 to amend the city zoning bylaw from single-family residential R1 zone to high-density residential R4 zone, bears the recommendation of the Planning Board. So I will move that it goes to council, and I think we, again, just need to clarify that this isn't moving the motion to approve or...
The planning board has to make a recommendation toward a council, not just moving it forward. So you're actually making a recommendation for or against the thing, so that it's bearing a recommendation of this smaller committee. Council then decides whether they choose to accept or approve that. So this committee's purpose is to bring forth a recommendation to the entire committee, not just moving it to the committee.
Okay, very good. So,
So
as a, yeah, I was gonna say, as a planning board member, I'd like to at least provide a background or a reason as to why I'm recommending it to council. And that is, I guess, based on the information that we have, I'm comfortable doing that. So I will, did you want to add something, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, so I'm just clarifying, based on the information we have now, we are recommending whether or not this should be approved by council. So if we say yes, go ahead, we are telling council that we support the application in theory.
That's my understanding, yes. Yep.
It's not just to get it to the next.
And as Councillor Duran said, not to say you don't continue to evaluate or review your thoughts and the whole proposal, but based on the information you had before you today, your subcommittee of a planning board are making a recommendation to the entire council in May 15th, or whatever that date is.
And regardless how we vote today, we could switch our vote to the next one. I'm not saying it as I know, but I think that's how I understand it, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to get that officially kind of before us as well, just to, so I'll move that at this point, and if I have a seconder, we'll take the vote, and if we don't, it's gotta be planning. You're our new member, okay, seconded by Councillor Morrison. All on the planning board in favor, say aye. Opposed? So that's tied. What does that mean? The mayor is a member of planning board, so you can't break the tie if you already voted. It'll move forward, okay, without necessarily a recommendation from planning board, okay.
There's 4 members of planning board, correct? Right? So the, right. Correct.
That's where I was going with the top.
So can we
Correct.
clarify how that moves forward to council? It moves forward with the.
With a, I guess, with a note that says at the planning board level, the vote was 2-2.
Okay, thank you.
All right, your worship, did you want to have some sort of a segue into the next one, or just?
I
carry
think
on?
you can carry on
Okay.
with item 6, yeah, please.
Very good. Next item, recommendation, mobile sales establishment for 60 Water Street. Supporting explanation. The purpose of the application is to allow a mobile sales establishment, Go Fish Eatery, to operate at 60 Water Street. Background, Trent Murphy applied for a mobile sales establishment license at 60 Water Street, weather permitting. Mr. Murphy's proposed hours of operation are 11:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Mobile sales establishment means a business located in a motorized vehicle or movable structure that is towed or moved by a motorized vehicle, and where all of the goods, wares, or foodstuffs that are offered for sale are contained entirely within the motorized vehicle or movable structure, but does not include a lunch truck. Report under the Section 3 City of Summerside Licensing Bylaw CS21. The bylaw states the following. 13, mobile sales establishment license. A, any person or company seeking a license to operate a mobile sales establishment in the city shall make application therefore to the council. B, licenses may be granted for a mobile sales establishment to conduct business on a maximum of 2 locations in the city, and each application shall be accompanied by a letter of permission from the owner or owners of the property on which the mobile sales establishment will be located. C, council shall allow or refuse the application based upon considerations of safety, desirability, impact on established businesses in the city, public convenience, and such other considerations as it deems appropriate. D, council may attach terms and conditions to the approval of the license if granted, including but not limited to hours and days of operation, health code requirements, litter control, and approved locations. E, the license for a mobile sales establishment shall be valid for the calendar year in which the application is made only. A new application is required to council for each calendar year. And F, no appeal shall lie from a decision of council respecting a mobile sales establishment license. Staff comments, in addition to the license being sought, Mr. Murphy is seeking permission from the city to operate his mobile sales establishment on city-owned land at 60 Water Street. The exact location of the mobile sales establishment on the property at 60 Water Street is to be determined by the city and applicant. Recommendation, city staff support the application received from Trent Murphy to operate a mobile sales establishment, Go Fish Eatery, at 60 Water Street, property owned by the city of Summerside. The planning board recommendation, whether carried or defeated, will be brought forward for council for a final decision. Planning board recommendation, the mobile sales establishment application from Trent Murphy to allow a mobile sales establishment, Go Fish Eatery, to operate at 60 Water Street be recommended to be approved by council. Any questions or? Deputy Mayor Snow.
Do we usually give approval on city-owned land, or I don't recall whether or not, and I guess my question is, are we opening up to every food truck? How do we say no after we say
Right.
yes to this individual? I know the food truck in question, just from seeing it in other places, and it definitely, from everything I hear, it's a great food truck, but I'm just looking, that's sort of one of our public parking areas to access our boardwalk. I don't know, I'm just sort of curious to that question. Have we had that in the past?
We haven't had it in the past, to my knowledge. Deputy CAO JP was in discussions with the applicant, and in JP's opinion anyway, it was doable on kind of a pilot project. He thought there was room for both the food truck and parking for boardwalk users in that area. But yeah.
Yeah, and I too have concerns around that. We haven't done it in the past that I recall, and if it has been done in the past, it's been for a food truck on a temporary basis. But I'm just not comfortable, I guess, going forward. How do we say no somewhere else? If you want to set up in Credit Union Place parking lot, can I go sell fish there? I'm not comfortable with it, and not against the sales establishment. I think there's lots of properties around that is suitable for that area. Could be right across the road. Yeah. You know, I think there's areas where he can find besides city property. It's my own thought, so thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah.
I think, I don't know where it finished that. I know we looked at this location, previously, and we looked at whether it'd be one or more at a staff level, or what. I'm not sure if it came to planning board asking questions or not a number of years ago. But I think they ended up going to other locations, and then the port kind of evolved into that food truck. So this place there was some staff inquiries at least. I'm not sure at what level they went to planning board or council or senior management prior. I was aware of some that were expressing interest. I can't recall how it fully played out, but I know they ended up going to the, I'll call it the food truck patio area that the port created as one location for multiple spots, but that's only my recollection, that's all.
This is a sale. It's not a food truck, right? It's just a sales.
No,
That's what they
It's
call
a-
the food truck.
It's an eatery.
It's not a buy fresh fish, it's a food truck as far as I know.
Like you can buy fish and
Okay.
chips and,
Just the way it read there, but can't be a food truck. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
No,
what-
Just the name of the business is eatery, but
The
it's
food
not a-
truck is like when coming to a job site, the guy opens up and having that's what
Oh, okay.
that's what's not, but typically the mobile, what do we call them, mobile sales establishment, but it's basically someone setting up a business to
Right.
cook and prepare food and sell it there. Not the ones that are just driving in, I'll say, to a job site, open up the truck and they got the coffees and everything there. That's what they're predominantly calling
Yeah,
a food
thank
truck.
you. It was just the way it was
Sure.
read there. Thank you.
and I think the service has been done in Kensington, at Haunted Mansion, like there's been different times, and different locations. This might be an extra one, but, and I have no vested interest. I'm just trying to think of the different places, but I know down on the Harbor Drive area, where the food truck area was last year. It's not going to be there again this year. So, I mean, I'll just put that out there. It is established.
I just have a quick question. We don't have any, do we have any rules for on-street parking for mobile food vendors, establishments, food trucks?
We don't have anything saying that the city can't do that. There's nothing in the license that says that. It just says you have to have permission from the owner, whether it's a city or a private business or whatever. But I just wanted to add, we did have another vendor that we did approve. It was a hot dog establishment that was on the former Venture building up on Greenwood Drive that we did permit at one time. So that was one that the city did approve.
And I guess if we did have on-street, we'd be in the same, you'd be on city property as well, right? I certainly. I am very pro food truck, but I'm pro anything that brings people outside to gather and eat with each other, so.
And I guess just to, oh, go ahead. That was me that started to talk. I was just going to build on something that Councillor MacDougall said, in that we haven't done this before, and doing so might, set a precedent. With that in mind, I know that we get these on a case-by-case basis, and for something that might not fit in one area for one applicant might be different for another. Just a recent example, I know we did Corey Arsenault's up on Central Street. First time that we allowed something like that in that sort of a zone, and it was approved. So just, I guess, wanted to more or less put that out there and sort of compare those two instances. Councillor McCollum.
Well, I guess I'm looking at it, I'm just trying to get a visual. That's in the area where the gazebo is and parking, and then it connects up to the boardwalk all around. That's where it's at, the location. So I'm looking at that, and I noticed in the writing that the comment was that it would be based on what the city would recommend as far as the location, if they were to be accepted or whatnot. So I look at that as, if there are people there already, going to park for the boardwalk or whatever, that is an added feature in a sense, and I'm not trying to, but I mean, the gazebo is there and there's seating there, so I can't see where it would be really high traffic, other than entering and exiting, so I'll just say that and leave it there.
Yeah, no, I guess just to kind of clear the sort of waters a bit, I think it seems like a sort of a good location for a food truck, and it is, these applications, should they be approved, they're only good for a year. If it doesn't work, you don't have to approve it next year. So, just for what that's worth. So, anybody else? Okay, we'll call for the planning board vote, I guess. The mobile sales establishment application from Trent Murphy to allow a mobile sales establishment, Go Fish Eatery, to operate at 60 Water Street, be recommended to be approved by council. Moved by myself, seconded by anyone? Deputy Mayor Snow. All in favor of the planning board, say aye. Opposed? So that carries. I believe that's all I have, Your Worship. I will pass things back over to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duran. Excellent job as always. And now I will adjourn our planning board meeting of May 2nd, 2023. I'm just going to take 1 minute and let councillors get their documents together. And then if there's any members of the public who are here for the planning board, now's a good chance to stretch your legs and go, or you can stay for the rest of the show as well. Council ready? You guys good to just keep going here? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay, we can do that. Sure we can. Okay, we'll move on to our next meeting, the planning board meeting having been adjourned. I will now call, now this is not going to be in the sequential order that's presented on the a series of meetings here. We're going to move to the bottom because it is a 6 p.m. start. So I'll call to order the special council meeting of May 2nd, 2023, it being 6:02 p.m. First, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda. The agenda is the one presented below under special council meeting. Councillor Adams, second Councillor Gallant. Anyone opposed to the agenda? Additions, revisions? Hearing none. The agenda will carry forward as presented. Conflict of interest for the one item. Hearing none from council. Moving on, 381 Notre Dame Street, discretionary use. Councillor Duran, this is back to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I forgot about that. All right, 381 Notre Dame Street, discretionary use. Background, an application was received from Boys and Girls Club of Summerside, Inc. for 381 Notre Dame Street, PID number 304691. This application will require city council approval to allow a child care facility medium as a discretionary use in the medium density residential R3 zone. The application was advertised in the April 19th edition of The Guardian, and letters were mailed to property owners within 60 meters or 200 feet of the subject properties. Medium density residential R3 zone. The purpose of this zone is to provide for medium density housing in the form of single family, semi-detached duplex dwellings and other compatible uses. Permitted uses in the medium density residential R3 zone, subject to bylaw requirements: single-family dwelling, semi-detached dwellings, duplex dwellings, accessory buildings, assisted living, manufactured home, mobile home lawfully existing prior to 1999. Discretionary uses, subject to council approval: child care facility medium, group home, townhouse, 8 units per building maximum, rooming house, boarding house, nursing care facility, row house, 8 units per building maximum, social services agency, tourism establishment, inn, or apartments, 4 units maximum. Conditional uses, subject to a permit in the R3 zone: home-based business, secondary suites, and tourism establishment, B&B and vacation rental property. The definition extracted from the zoning bylaw for child care facility is any facility where child care is licensed by the province of PEI under the Child Care Facilities Act. A medium child care facility means up to 50% of the floor area of a residential dwelling for care and supervision of 8 to 15 children for compensation, but shall not include overnight accommodation. 3, comments and questions. So the applicant is invited to make comments. Adam Binkley, or anyone that may be representing Adam Binkley, if anybody is representing the applicant, wants to say anything, by all means. He's here. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'd just like to start by saying that this is part of our pandemic recovery. So during the last 2.5 to 3 years plus, we've noticed a significant change in the needs and desires of our club members and parents. So I've been with the club quite a long time, and back in the day it was, a positive to have 125 children packing the club in the gym. You come in and out of the club, it's noisy, it's great, and that's what you want to hear. But it could have been previous to the pandemic, but it seems that voices are now being heard a lot more. Our children, right from the ages of 5+, are looking for less noise, and they're dealing with anxiety and depression and behavioral management issues and that type of thing. And our club is inclusive. Our doors are open to anybody, obviously, and but our environment is not. We don't have the space to offer what is needed, and that is smaller groups doing programs with limited noise and being able to give more care and attention to the children and youth. So owning the Youth Engagement Center across the street, it's our intention to provide a program upstairs called the SITE program, which is Sensory Inclusion, Technology and Environment. It would be with a smaller group between 8 and 15, probably start out with about 9 as a pilot project, and it would be programming for all our kids across the street, but they would go to 381 in this small group with our trained professional staff and work on programming that better fits their needs. Questions?
Hey Adam, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
I guess my question would be, currently it's the Youth Engagement Center, so why are we having to rezone it, or what are we?
For
I guess I'm-
licensing, for
Oh,
licensing with the province, for
Okay.
ages, let's say 5 to 10 would be a different license that we have now that would be for 11 to 18 or
Okay,
11 plus.
That makes sense, okay, thank you.
Originally, the Youth Engagement Center was for 13 and over, but times have also changed, so we've already offered programming for 11 plus because 11-year-olds are pretty much like 13-year-olds 15, 20 years ago when we decided to open the Youth Engagement Center. So we're looking, the overall goal would be to expand the club down the road. We're in the middle of a couple of major projects, as council and mayor are aware of. So doing that right now isn't a possibility. So we're looking at doing a pilot project at the Youth Engagement Center and then hopefully be able to offer that at the club at some point in time.
So, Adam, just, I want to make sure nobody else light is on. So for the age group, as you said, 13 to 18, so
Yes?
are they involved any longer with programming, or?
Oh, 100%. We have 11 youth programs for that age.
Okay,
They actually could be involved with the site programming too, because with the sensory and inclusion and technology environment, they'd be able to utilize that space as well. The Youth Engagement Center is 3 floors, so we're able to accompany both groups. And there's obviously talks of having the youth mentor the participants of the site program.
I think you're free to go.
Sure. Before I leave, though, I do want to thank the mayor and council for the 2023-24 community grant. So that money is definitely a great asset and resource to the club, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. B, public is invited to make comments, so floor is open if anybody wishes to speak on this. For any questions or comments, I guess Adam's still here if anybody has any specific questions, but if not, we'll carry on. Okay, number 4, explanation of the process. In order to process a discretionary use, the following steps are required. Step 1, the discretionary use is read at a public meeting. Step 1 is taking place this evening. Step 2, planning board reviews the application and prepares a recommendation to council. Step 2 takes place at the planning board meeting. Step 3, the discretionary use is read to be adopted by council. The resolution will be either carried or defeated by vote of council. Step 3 takes place at council's second meeting. Please note that in accordance with section 5.20 of the city zoning bylaw, any person who is dissatisfied by a decision of council in respect to the administration of this bylaw may appeal council's decision within 21 days to the Island Regulatory and Appeals Commission, IRAC. So that, I think, does it for me this evening. Your worship.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. Thank you to the Boys and Girls Club and Adam for presenting and answering any questions here today. And thanks to all members of the public who are joining us in person and virtually with respect to this matter. At this point, I will adjourn the special council meeting on May 2nd, 2023. Quick question. Thank you again. See you guys. Quick question just for council. Do you guys want to just continue on to the committee of the whole? That, yep. Okay. Moving on to the last meeting of the night, I will call to order. We originally called this meeting to order in camera, but I'm going to call it to order now as well. The committee of the whole meeting May 2nd, 2023. First, I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Councillor Gallant, second. Councillor Adams. Anyone opposed to the agenda or any revisions, additions? Hearing none, we will proceed with the agenda as presented. Conflict of interest declarations. Any member of council wish to declare a conflict of interest? Hearing none, we will check off item number 3, and we'll move right into item 4, presentation here from Chief Sinclair Walker with respect to parking on the north side of Green Street. Welcome, Chief, back.
I guess what we're proposing here is, we had a request actually from the Parkside School principal in regards to the safety of the children exiting the vehicles. So what we want changed is, that we already made some changes up in around that area of the school, Parkside School, a while back. So what we want is to change no parking on the north side of Green Street between spring and summer to allow parking, and make the south side of Green Street between spring and summer as a no parking zone. And the recommendation is, of course, is to designate the north side of Green Street between spring and summer from no parking to allow parking. Designate the south side of Green between Spring and Summer Street as a no parking zone. The supporting explanation: this will improve the safety of the children being dropped off at Parkside School, allowing them to exit the vehicles on the passenger side, which will prevent them from crossing the street in traffic. And there is an attached diagram as well. And the alternative, of course, is leave it as is. The advantage is to improve the student safety. Disadvantage is none foreseen as far as the cost. It will be minimal. It will just be the work of changing the signs from one side of the street to the other.
Yeah, council, any questions? Carrie?
So as you said, Chief, this would assist with the issue that we were having with the drop-off and pickup, right? Because it would be a safer drop-off on the sidewalk side. Yeah.
And I'm just being the counselor for that ward area where the Parkside School is situated. I think every one of us has seen that area with, you know, young children getting in and out, and a number of residents have called with the concerns that they do have. So I do feel that it's a very positive move.
So I'm just clarifying, I think it's pretty clear, but I just want to, so side of the sidewalk, we're gonna start parking, except for the two blued out stretched areas here at the end, and then the other side is no parking.
No parking.
So one side parking, one side no parking.
That'll actually allow more parking on that side,
Mm.
because the fact there's a lot of driveways on the south side.
Exactly, yeah. So then, and then we're still keeping the no parking in the Summer Street in front. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, not touching that at all.
Yep.
Chief, I have a quick question there. I just received a call from a resident yesterday evening, actually, and then followed up with an email today, and I think they had spoken to you. I just wanted to, I think they live at the corner of Spring and Green. And I just, my apologies, I didn't connect the two. I was trying to get my kids dinner and off to wherever we were trying to go, and on the cell phone, and I didn't connect it to tonight. So I was just wondering if you can, they had reached out and said, oh, is there a chance to talk? I just wanted to, my message on all of these types of things is we're all experts on parking, but none of us are except for ultimately the police. I said I would reach out to you, and I just wondered if you are aware of those issues and concerns, if you could just raise them or let me know what they are.
Yes, I'm aware. Actually, I spoke to them earlier today, and they sent actually an email there, and it says, ChiefWalker, as requested, here are our thoughts on the proposal for parking on the north side of Green Street. Limit the allowed parking stall from midway of Green Street to the corner of Summer. Also, our suggestion is for proposed signage for the north side of Green should be school specific, and they sent some signs as an example. I think, in my understanding when I talked to them, actually, their biggest concern is that it's going to allow parking on that north side, which is going to allow more parking in the evenings, and when of course the ball games are over and the activities within the park, they feel it's going to create more noise for them. So that was what their concern was. So they didn't think that the whole side of that street should be allowed parking, and perhaps I don't know, to pick a number of parking spots on that north side. That was their concern, was more about the noise, you know, after the games and so on and so forth.
That, that's a pretty interesting comment. Is there a reason why it's not just declared a school drop-off zone or a temporary, so we don't have teachers just parking there or whoever parking there? Because the intent of this whole thing is to get our students off, picked up. It's not to create more parking. There's tons of parking in the evening for the ball fields. I'm there almost every evening during the summer. There's tons of parking for teachers. Just putting it as strictly parking now, there's nothing stopping a teacher from parking there, and we're in the exact same thing. So I'm just wondering if it shouldn't be a 15-minute time frame, whatever, or a temporary, I don't know. I think their comment just sort of triggered a light bulb saying that makes total sense, that it should be just a drop-off zone, school drop-off, or.
You still have to make that south side though, that south side no parking, right? Because you can't have parking both sides of the street.
No, I agree, yeah, it's south side no parking, but the side that we're then allowing parking, or not parking, allowing the drop-off. And I don't know how you do that traffic-wise or tech services-wise, but I think it makes sense if we're trying to just create a safe spot for kids to get dropped off and not additional parking. We should do that.
My only comment on that would be that currently, I don't think we've heard any issues. Currently, people are allowed to park on the south side, right, with no time restrictions, and we haven't heard any issues of teachers or anyone else parking there all day. But regarding the events in the evenings, as I was looking at the proposal, I was thinking kind of the opposite, that there are times when Queen Elizabeth Park is full, and when on-street parking in the immediate area is at a premium. And I'm again thinking from personal experience, there have been times when those extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 parking spaces compared to the south side, in my opinion, would have come in quite handy for people that were using Queen Elizabeth Park. Not every night for sure, but there have been instances where I think a few extra parking spaces would actually be beneficial. But because right now, what happens, and to the cars end up parking going south on Spring Street, sometimes all the way down to the funeral home and pass, right? When there's a big event going on, or when, so.
Were you first?
It doesn't matter, go ahead.
I will just speak to that matter because I have heard from residents with regards to parking when it was on the other side of the street, but always what the concern was, and it's been brought forward in the past year and a half to police services, is that when there are games, it's after it's finished that, a lot of people may stay around. There could be, really loud noises, people trying to sleep, if there's seniors or young children in bed, that sort of thing. That's what I've heard from the residents in around the Spring Street, Green Street area. So I think that's probably, maybe where some of those concerns are. And I think, in some cases where cars are parked in front of walkways or whatever, it's very difficult for the families on that side, the opposite side. So I think where that comment is coming from, it might be those types of concerns. Fighting, language, that sort of thing.
We don't get a lot of complaints, so the police doesn't, yeah.
But I'm just kind of.
Yeah. And like the Gordon mentioned there, we don't get any complaints at all about the parking on the south side all day. So.
I'm surprised we're talking about this because I agree with Deputy Mayor that Snow, that we've eliminated the parking in the red zone over here, and we're doing this to accommodate the parents to come in and pick up their kids. So I would think that a couple of signs would have been going with it. I wasn't even going to question it because that's what I figured we were doing. This is to drop them off and pick them up. because it was happening up there, and we cleared that all up. So I would hope that there was going to be a sign going up there for 15-minute parking or something. I guess I just would have assumed it, but anyway, whatever.
I keep going back and forth, so I heard Gordon, I thought, yeah, you know what, that's a great idea, and then I hear Bruce, so if we do allow so are we just gonna create the exact same problem we had going around the corner on the next street over? So cars will start parking, and then we'll have kids getting dropped off on the opposite side of the street, while running across the street because there's no place to pull up and just drop off. So the theory of the drop-off zone is you can get in, drop your kids off, and get the heck out, so the next one will get behind you.
The challenge that we kind of identified, I guess, was we made, at Parkside's request, and the school board and the bus drivers, we made that Summer Street area no parking. And it was no and the communication that's gone to the parents, or is supposed to, from the school is no parking, no drop-off, no idling, no nothing, type thing. Cars shouldn't be going in there. So then, parents are saying, okay, so where do I drop off, right? And they've identified the north side as being ideal, because drive up, kid hops out. But right now, that north side says no parking. So arguably, the parent doesn't feel comfortable pulling into a no parking zone and letting the kid jump out, right?
So so I guess my question is, can the sign change from no parking to school drop-off zone? So no long, there's signs all over the world that says all different things, so it could say no long standing, no whatever, 15-minute parking. I don't know what you need to, I'm not a traffic expert, but you can write whatever you want on a sign and stick it there.
I think it could, if that's council's wishes, but staff's recommendation is that we create parking on, that we remove the parking on the south side, create parking on the north side, and we think that will help alleviate a few problems.
Do we create the same problem we just got rid of, where vehicles are coming, and kids are getting dropped off on the side that has no parking because it's just easy, because there's cars parked everywhere, and they're running across the street while cars are going up and down.
The issue that was brought forward from the school board was mostly to do with the school buses. It's the school buses and kids running out in front of school buses, and the bus drivers not being able to see, and the cars being in the area. So,
Last question, can we ask the school if they would prefer a drop-off zone as opposed to no parking? Because I would think, I'm not the school principal, but if I could get cars in and gone again, and everybody getting dropped off on that one side.
the other piece that was noted from the school and the parent group about when we created the no parking in summer, parents said, okay, where am I supposed to park if it's 11 a.m. in the morning and I have to stop and pick up Johnny or Susie from school, or I have to run in to see the teacher, right? So again, this would create a safe area for people to park during those times as well, so that's, but.
I think that would fall under the school pickup or drop off.
Something that nobody's really picking up on yet is that we could do both and just put on the sign, no parking, pick up, drop off only between 8 and 4. Which means once school's out, you can park there, go to the ball field.
So can't we just do what Chief has proposed? And if it doesn't work for the remainder of the school year, because we only have 2 months left, then we can revisit it for something else in September? Would that make everybody happy? Yeah.
I guess I'd only point out, having had to drive my kids to school during the COVID and not being able to put them on the bus, it isn't drop-off that's the problem. I used to live across, it's pickup. Let's be honest.
Right.
Drop-off's no problem. Some parents don't even stop. They just keep driving. The kid jumps out and runs to one of the 2 schools there. It's the pickup. And there's the schools that just simply, it is just not designed for the number of people to pick up. So that's, we could argue this for days, try and figure it out, but I certainly like to defer to what police recommend, and if it doesn't work out, we can direct comments to the police if we hear them, and come back and revisit it. Now, Gordon, do we need motions or anything on this type of stuff? And I guess it raises the second question, is maybe it would be worth looking at what council's role is on these types of parking discussions.
No, we don't need a motion. We're bringing it to committee for information and for committee to ask questions. We will bring a resolution to council. The second part of that question is certainly maybe a discussion that council may want to have at some point. Having council be the final say on traffic authority and stop signs and no parking and is certainly in some municipalities the council does get involved in those things, and in other municipalities they don't. So that's maybe a discussion at some point.
Thank you, Gordon. We'll move on now to item 5, which is MacKenzie Drive, speeding traffic calming. Councillor MacDougall, you wanted to bring this forward for discussion.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you know, we've all gone door to door on the recent election, and probably the 3 priorities or the top concerns that came to was housing and homelessness and speeding was right there, you know, with and it's all over the city. We have a concern on MacKenzie Drive. Now, prior to last fall, we put in a speed sign down there, and that has certainly helped. And I've talked to a lot of people down there, and we have some people here this evening too. But the biggest thing we have is coming out. We sort of fixed it somewhat going in, but coming out, when they're coming down putters and then they head out, I go down there all the time, 2 and 3 times a day, and I don't witness a whole lot of speeding going in, but going out, there seems to be an issue. Now, prior to the elections, we had talked about putting a speed bump in there, speed bump, speed hump, but I think Fiona happened, and they were, at the time, they were lifting the temporary ones and taking them in for the winter. So I've chatted with Mr. Perro down there, and the residents there do have concerns with the speeding, and it continues. And I know it's an issue there, but there's an issue in lots of places in the city. But I know in the budget this year we asked to have some traffic calming money put in there. So and I know the city police department does their part, but they can't be everywhere. And so I'm asking that we look into putting a speed bump somewhere on MacKenzie Drive. I'm not sure who we, I know Mr. Farrow was here, and did you have any comment? Sorry we kept you so long too. I think I told you it started at 5, but it
good
did.
evening. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm actually, my name is Chris Farrow.
Yeah.
I'm a resident of MacKenzie Drive with my wife Catherine. And we actually are the very first residents of MacKenzie Drive. We bought our townhouse in 2012 when that townhouse building was the only building on the street. And we were down there by ourselves for quite a while. And the inevitable happened, development, which is good. And along with it came huge volumes of traffic, construction traffic.
Yeah.
And that's been exacerbated by the extension of Linkletter Road, MacKenzie Drive with Putter Street. That's been developed in the last 2 years as well. So we have a dangerous situation, and 2 doors down from us, we have a 9-year-old girl that gets on the bus every day, on and off the bus. So I'm not one to complain without offering solutions. And a couple of the solutions I've made in the past have been speed bumps, temporary speed bumps, to see if that's effective. Because not everybody wants a permanent speed bump on their road necessarily, but I suggested we try temporary ones. The response I got from the city was that they're being used. So I kept my problem-solving hat on, and I suggested, well, why don't we put money in the budget for 2023 for a couple more temporary speed bumps? So there's I think 3 empty lots on MacKenzie Drive now, and so they can be placed in front of those empty lots, so they're not inconvenience anybody that lives on MacKenzie Drive. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And during the municipal election campaign, Mayor Kusher and I had a conversation about this at my door. And his response to me was, this is a simple enforcement issue. So my question to you, council, is what is the plan to enforce the law? Thanks.
Well, the enforcement, all I can do is ask the police to patrol the area, and they've done that, and I know that there's concerns down in that area at night, and I know that they're down there because I get reports of it, so I'm not sure if, Gordon, if you want to comment, or Sinclair?
I was just asking the chief, and I recall that we collected some data on that street, on that road, I guess, sometime last, I'll say season, last summer.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers at the tip of my fingers, but I'll certainly commit to getting a look at that.
Right.
As this council knows, and we've talked about it with previous councils, there's certainly pros and cons to speed humps. We have a certain amount of temporary speed humps. We've put permanent humps in places, mostly around schools. Many residential neighborhoods complain about perceived speeding. So it's...
Yeah. Could we put a temporary speed hump or bump, whatever you want to call it, up there? I think there's 2 lots that there's nobody in front of, and it seems like the area, this just be east of the apartment building, right? I believe. And if we could put one there temporary to see if it does anything.
That's certainly an option. We have, on other sections of streets where people have had concerns around speeding, we've put speed humps down, measured, and taken the data that we had before the speed hump went down, taken the data that we had after the speed hump down.
Right.
And in some instances, the speeds have increased.
Yeah.
So, but it's...
Well, I'd like to try that. I certainly like to try that. And if I could get the support of council, I'd appreciate it too. So, thank you.
I have a question. We have a new traffic unit, right? Is there the traffic unit vehicle, and have they been down on MacKenzie lately? Yeah. I know certainly there's been a lot of time down there as well. Obviously, one of the difficulties is that's another street that has been built to accommodate motorists as opposed to being engineered for safety of residents. But another situation, we have a wide street and no sidewalk on the side where residences are, and then it is a long, straight street. And I certainly, I don't remember speaking specifically with you, but I remember hearing that over and over through on MacKenzie, and I've seen it, and I think we've probably all done it too, to a certain extent, when you're driving straight. looking out and trying to see the water or whatever, your mind goes, and staying under 40, sometimes you just don't even, you just all of a sudden look down and go, oh shoot, I'm not supposed to do that. And it happens, I think, more when you're going straight and you're looking far ahead. And it is really, really important from that 40 kilometer, that number is really important, because I was just reading today that 90% of pedestrian collisions that occur with a vehicle under 40 kilometers an hour, the pedestrian survives. Once you get over that, you're at a 50-50 shot. So it is quite a significant difference in risk. And I remember the last time driving down there, I watched a small kid on a little scooter bike in the driveway, and they're all sloped down to the road as well, right? Yeah, certainly it is another situation where we sort of look at how do we institute proper traffic calming measures on this stuff, aside from potentially building narrower streets and more sidewalks. But in the future, as we develop our city, that should help, but it doesn't help right now. So I'm game for whatever to try to alleviate that. But I'm sure all councillors here I've heard, can I put a speed bump in front of my house? And I've probably heard, once one goes in, why'd you put a speed bump?
And I know that, and I'm very concerned about that. And I talked to an awful lot of people on MacKenzie. I talked to all of them, and there's some of them that said, yes, put it in front of my place. And then they called me and said, no. And I've had a couple of those, but that vacant lot that's there, if we could put a temporary speed bump there and do some calculating on the numbers, that gives us something to go with. But I think it's a start. And so if we could do that, I'd be really appreciate it. Thank you.
Just if I may, Councillor Bruce, I know that we did, just as maybe food for thought, I know how important it is to the residents. We did one, and I've mentioned it before, on Maple Avenue, thinking that I did hear, or we did hear from the residents that it was a real concern, so our police services did enact that. And then we did hear and had to have some meetings with residents that they didn't want it. And one of the reasons was because of the trucks just going by the houses. If they were empty, like say with the development taking place, it really caused a lot of noise and disruption for them. So now that had to be removed. It was a portable, I don't know what the right word is for it. But anyway, luckily we could do that. So it really surprised me, because I thought that I did hear from the residents, but some of them found it noisy afterwards. So.
Just one last question since we have the chief here. Chief, when there are areas identified in the city where people are concerned about traffic, speed, or running stop signs and that kind of thing, I'm assuming that flows through Gordon to police services to put some focus on that space.
Usually how the process works is we certainly let police know that there's been concerns raised, and more often than not, I think there's a increased presence in that area for a period of time, at least to get some idea of how, what the issue is. And then throughout the summer season, we do traffic data collection on the areas that have been identified as being an issue, and then try to use that data to guide decisions moving forward.
I guess just for clarification, can we, while we're collecting the data, can we put the speed bump down, collect the data, and then decide after that?
Is that a question for me or for council? Like I'm fine. We have 2 or 3 or 4, I'm not sure which, temporary speed humps that haven't been placed out yet.
Right.
My instructions to public works staff were, I'll be honest, I said don't place any out just because somebody calls you. Make sure the requests flow through my office. if this is, so we haven't placed any out yet for this
Right.
year. If this is an area that council wants to put one down, I think that's perfectly reasonable. The only, I think some consideration in these decisions should be given to whether or not a street is strictly residential, or whether or not it's, you know, that the traffic is there for other purposes as well. So, you know, like strictly in a residential zone, you are only either helping or inconveniencing the people that are right there. On some of our other more highly trafficked streets, right, you are either helping or inconveniencing
Yeah.
other people who are using that street, right? I think we've had tremendous success with the speed humps that we put on Elm Street, and out in Greenfield, like we put them around the school zones, we put multiple humps, and
Yeah.
that, those seem to have really helped those issues, right? But they've also diverted traffic, right? I know
Yeah.
some people who used to always go down Elm Street now don't, they go down Duke. So
Perfect. Anyway, I guess,
I'm fine with,
do I,
I'm fine with if we try one,
okay.
but I don't,
Is everybody okay if we try it down there?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. Did-
I know, he said like, so I have somebody on Matheson that wants one. And, he was told by staff that, you know, we have to do the testing, the studying first, and then go from there. I'm also wondering about, you know those, what we did on Craig, the traffic calming, is it Craig? Yeah, like, is that something, do we have more of those that we could try in different areas, or what was the feeling from those at the end of the season?
yeah, again, I have to go back and look at, they're definitely, so what Councillor Adams is talking about, they're two portable
Yeah.
kind of concrete chicanes that we put on Craig to narrow the street at a place. And I guess I don't wanna say the hope, but the hope was that they might be less intrusive, not having the sound. I have to go back and chat with tech services on the data on those, but certainly something we were piloted last year.
I'm just interested to know if they thought it made a difference.
I guess to that point, we often do things and try new things, and either they work or they don't, but I think too often we don't get the feedback on it until we get back around. So we put those out last year, now we're talking about putting speed humps again, when maybe the chicanes or whatever they're called worked. So, I know Aaron and them did a large traffic calming study, with possibilities, and we try things, and sometimes I feel we spin our tires, which will go in pretty good too. Well, not the next one, a couple down, but, yeah, it'd be interesting to know what the feedback is on other.
Well, on
methods we
Craig,
try.
I can give you the feedback. They did not like it at all.
The chicanes.
Yep,
The speed humps.
there's the cranes. They did not like them at all. They don't want them back.
And again, part of the issue potentially is perception versus, right, like, there have been streets where we've put a stop sign in and the traffic has actually increased, but the residents are much happier, right? The data is showing that the traffic speed is higher, but the stop sign's there, the resident's happy, and right, so, we've tried a number of things, and I think we'll continue to keep trying. The increase in resources to the police service and the traffic division is likely gonna be the best bang for our buck.
Well, I can tell you one area that is definitely needed, the one is in Hillcrest. The little kids that are running in the middle of the street and cars are coming all over the place, there will be an accident up there. Big time.
I wonder if we can maybe try using MacKenzie Drive as a bit of a, maybe we can try and throw a few things at it and see what kind of works, get some ideas from it. You know,
Yeah,
try the enforcement and then do the, pardon? It's more 3D, except for the 3D crosswalks. Maybe this is a good example of a space to try a number of things and get the feedback and, yeah.
And absolutely.
Yeah, so
we've
take
been
that
at this
data
for-
approach.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor MacDougall. Moving on to item 6, so this is Councillor Adams, want to have a quick chat on Canada Day activities. Councillor Adams, I did speak to Deputy CAO JP there, and there's a meeting this week, and they have a lot of the details already laid out. So his sort of message was,
Yeah.
let me know for next year, but see where we're at for this year too. So I can
Yes.
relay whatever I hear here today through on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Thanks. Okay.
So, did you want to go over the email he sent?
Sorry, I keep muting everybody because it's so close and I use my left hand.
You
So
just
never
can't help
take
yourself.
offense to that. If you want to start, I can also lay out the email too.
Yeah,
Whatever you want.
so, like, because different people have been asking about, the reason that I got into this whole thing was because I had questioned the civic ceremony portion of it, and that it was held separately with just invited guests and so on in the past, and it was felt that it wasn't very community oriented. So the question was, can the civic ceremony be held as part of the Canada Day, the whole thing that can happen down around Green Shore and along the water? Of course, it would be weather permitting, but I felt that that was probably great, so I mentioned it to JP and your worship, and here we are, so.
Great. I mentioned the same thing to JP, but separately, and not knowing you did.
There you
And
go.
I would support it 100%, so,
Yeah.
and none of us had that conversation, but that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it's just, it'd be nice for everybody to be there when the flag and Citizen of the Year and so on, like, it should be something that everybody's involved in. And the band stage, full production, everything, local bands and talent, children's activities and programming and fireworks, so it's all good.
Am I right in saying that it used to always be at Spinnaker's Landing as a kid? I just remember that being the area we'd go on Canada Day, and everybody'd receive their
So-
awards and be part of the festivities.
Yeah.
It's one central location.
They're just waiting on approval for funding for additional programming that can occur at Spinnaker's, which would be led and supported by the port, because the port owns Spinnaker's, and that would be in conjunction with Downtown Summerside and Explorer Summerside as well. So, and some of that budget also comes from Canadian Heritage, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Councillor. That's basically exactly what I have in front of me from JP as well. Yep. Everyone ready for Canada Day? All right. Awesome. Almost there. Moving on to item 7. So this is sort of a three-parter to a degree. Bringing forward Councillor Deputy Mayor Snow. Bylaw enforcement generally, demolition permits, and also the vacant property bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, yeah, it's something I usually bark on around this time of year, and their phone's starting to ring already, but it's also something that I've noticed that we have tried, and I don't know if it's just to either quiet certain people or what, but we went ahead and put in a vacant, what's it called? Vacant building bylaw, for example. Set out strict guidelines on how it was to be enforced, how we were gonna move ahead with it, and I can pretty much guess there's been zero action on some of those buildings. Some in my ward, some in other people's wards that have set vacant well before we brought bylaw amendments to the table, passed a new bylaw. In the bylaw, I was trying to read up on it a bit there today. I think it says if a building sits vacant for 90 days, the owner of the building is to come get an applicant. There's supposed to be a sign visibly displayed. Inspector's supposed to go out and inspect the property. So my question, it's all in together because some of the properties in question I know have been getting demolition permits, and they extend out over a year. Nothing gets done in a year, then you can, I don't know what happens then. So there's a number of questions I have around how we are enforcing our bylaws, how we expect to manage these. If we're just gonna pass bylaws and then not enforce them, it's a waste of everybody's time in here. So in the vacant property or vacant building bylaw, it says an inspector. I guess my question to staff would be, since we passed this bylaw, what, if any, work has been done to enforce the bylaw?
So on the vacant property bylaw, there has been very little. The day after that bylaw was passed, CBC ran an article on it. And then the phone started ringing from mostly senior citizens who were extremely concerned about what just happened. I just read these new rules, and they were concerned what it meant for their vacant property. At that point, staff said internally, okay, we need to slow down here and figure out how we're going to administer this bylaw. And then, to be honest, it hit the back burner, and we had a change in administration, and hasn't got picked back up again. I wasn't the CAO at the time. I'm not sure how much discussion council had around how that bylaw would potentially be enforced before it got enacted. I think I've updated council before. We do have a property on Water Street that's been an issue for a number of years, and staff have been working with external counsel I'd say quite diligently, trying to figure out the ownership of that building and try to create a path forward to deal with that property. But that is, obviously there are other vacant properties in the community. On bylaw enforcement in general, absolutely, this is the time of year when the snow melts and people come out of their house and they look at their neighbor's property and aren't happy. The process that we have initiated after the last unsightly premises bylaw review, there's a complaint form that we ask complainants to fill out and send in. Then the file gets turned over to police for enforcement. Officer visits the property, makes a determination whether there's a infraction or not. If there is an infraction, they write an order. Property owner has a certain amount of time to bring the property into standard. That can be 7, 14 days. If it doesn't happen, the improvement, I'd say, from the way it was previously, if it doesn't happen at that point, staff have the legal authority to hire a contractor to clean up the property. Previously, it was at that point that we had to come back to council, get on the agenda, and council pass a resolution for each and every property. So we think that change is going to make the process quite a bit more expedient. Chief can comment if he wishes. I think most people who get a visit from the police on a unsightly premises, most people say, okay, yeah, I understand, I got to get that cleaned up. So usually it's taken care of, but not always.
So, I guess it's a few questions. So, I know for a fact we put money into the budget at least once, if not twice, for a bylaw enforcement officer. We continued at that point to hear that we were hiring somebody, we had somebody in mind, then we didn't have somebody, then we're hiring somebody again, we didn't have somebody. My point of bringing this forward is now we're at this point again. I know it's a short period of time, but bylaw enforcement is more than a vacant house, or we have on-street parking issues in a number of areas. Councillor McColeman sent something yesterday regarding a certain area. There's lots of bylaw enforcement type stuff that our police, who we've met with recently on other things, are extremely busy. And when we pass bylaws and we take the time to sit here and go over bylaws and rewrite bylaws and pay legal thousands of dollars to rewrite bylaws, and then we don't enforce them, I can't think of a bigger waste of time and resources. From police resources to money to most valuable, everybody's time. So, again, I would like to see a way that these bylaws can be enforced I will ask again if we cannot please proceed with some sort of bylaw enforcement. For years and years and years, we started 4 years ago asking for traffic enforcement. When we started to ask for traffic enforcement, no, we can't do it, doesn't work, we don't need it, we have cops doing it already, they're out on the beat. Now we're getting traffic enforcement, and we're all sitting here praising it. I would ask that we at least try to actually put a bylaw enforcement officer in place, start enforcing the bylaws, because I have residents that are really concerned with vacant properties that are either close to their house or in an area, and what's gonna happen is something really negative where a building burns down, God forbid, a house next to it builds down, people are in it. We're talking about people living in parks and everywheres. We need to start enforcing the rules we have. I know we can't enforce everyone, but I do think we can do a better job in some of these areas. And I would hope that we take it seriously, because I don't want to say this negatively, but I feel that this issue has not been taken serious by staff in some ways, and it's unfortunate. I would like to see when council puts money in a budget and tries to enact certain things, that it actually at least gets done, so we can say, you know what, that worked, or it really didn't work. It was a 3D crosswalk, it didn't work, or it was a traffic enforcement and it really worked. So, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I figured the numbers would be that we didn't have anything on the books for vacant properties, but I can go around the room and we would all know of, if we asked everybody, name 3 vacant properties in Summerside, we'd all pick probably the same 3 vacant buildings that we all know of that are significant, that we're not trying to enforce or move forward, and I think that's doing a disservice.
The one thing that I will speak to, I certainly agree with everything that you're saying, Deputy Mayor Corey. In fairness, I think what happens is our residents, for all of our wards, they know us. When they have a concern or an issue that they're dealing with around nuisance or a bylaw infraction or whatever, we're usually the first person that they will make contact with. So I find it's a bit of a cumbersome piece of work to have to send an email in because they don't want to do a form, a bylaw form to indicate what the concern or the complaint is. So I find sometimes we're a little bit top-heavy in trying to follow the administration of it, when actually it's the councillor that people will try to reach out to first. And then we're in that situation of trying to quarterback between the department, between policing, between, whomever. And I don't think it's anyone's fault, or it just creates a real bottleneck in trying to get that work done, or in trying to have it seen to. And I don't know what we can do, but for me, that's the communication piece that I find is difficult. Now, having said that, the staff I find are very helpful to get back to us. I can only, speak, I run into that, they're very helpful. But I think sometimes the concerns, the complaints, the residents' needs that are coming in, there's just many different departments involved. And I think there's a bit of a bottleneck. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think I wrote down bylaw and complaints, and I know CAO and I have talked about this. It could be a complaint from resident to Councillor McColman, to the mayor, to the CAO, to staff, director, to other staff, to the chief of police, to police officers, back through. And I just think from that's a lot of person hours, where one of the gaps, that where you have senior management too of the city, where having having a perhaps more a robust reactive process, but also having some proactive opportunity to be able to proactively enforce bylaws. There are certainly some residents who don't want to. Bruce has got a bunch of garbage in his yard. Well, I'm still friends with Bruce. I don't want to necessarily go and rat out Bruce. And there are other bylaws too that whether it's the vacant property bylaw. If it's not working, then we need to hear that back from that individual. I've certainly been on the record multiple times saying that I think we should have a bylaw enforcement and complaints officer, whatever the proper terms are, and again, try and relieve the police. But all this, I know there are HR challenges to these types of positions, especially when they peak in the spring before the foliage comes and covers up whatever's left. But I think it's certainly worthy of council's consideration.
One piece, just from a process point of view, I think you're absolutely correct. When somebody has a complaint, they start phoning everybody, and that's why we did try to create a streamlined process where there's a form, and please fill out the form. Then we have an ability to track it. The form goes to the police. They have the phone numbers, and they know the contact information of the people to call to get more information if they need it. If council wishes, we can attempt to hire a bylaw enforcement officer again. We may be successful this time. We have made many attempts over the last 4 years when we haven't been, and we weren't successful, but again, that doesn't mean that we might not be successful this time around. I don't want to say, there's certainly a seasonality to the amount of work, and rightly or wrongly, I think in years past when we've tried to hire somebody and we didn't get somebody, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're near the end of the summer and we're into October, and then the issue kind of dies down and gets quiet and everybody is dealing with other things. Active enforcement of property standards, property standard type bylaws could yield interesting results. We've had, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. They could yield interesting results depending on how aggressive a bylaw officer wanted to be, and could lead to some interesting either decision-making points or prosecutions or litigation type thing. But anyway, because we've gone down the road, we've talked a lot about long grass over the years. Our current bylaw states a length that your grass is allowed to be. I guess I'm on record with council many times over the years talking about the challenges that we might face with enforcement of that property standard. We've had other issues where people have had stuff in their yard that one neighbor deems to be junk, and the property owner says, that's my stuff. It's not junk, that's my stuff. You may not like the look of it, but that's my stuff. So anyway, it's certainly not an easy issue to rectify to everybody's satisfaction, but if council wishes, we can certainly take a look at what the options are in terms of a law enforcement officer.
And Gordon, I agree with you. There's some very subjective stuff there, long grass, and what our former mayor used to say, talk about what is junk to somebody else, or what, I can't remember how he said it, I forget how he said it, but he used to always say something like that. But I guess my point is we did a lot of work, especially on that vacant building bylaw, and nothing's happening. And that's unfortunate. And there's significant buildings in our city that are vacant that we need to, as a city, encourage either the current owners to move them along to somebody that's going to do something, make sure they're in good condition so it's not affecting the neighboring properties. There's lots of stuff we can be doing without even looking at the long grass, without even looking. There's some real significant things that will improve our city for the people that live in our city that we're not doing because we're not enforcing the bylaws that we just recently changed. Mm-hmm. And I find that bothers me a bit because we did go through a big process. We make multiple readings in city council and then it goes to the media, and then the same buildings are still sitting there and people come to you and like, what are you doing? So if it's just, I want to make sure that people know that it's not just for show that we're doing these things. We should be then enforcing the bylaws that we feel so strongly about to change. So, I don't know what comes out of this discussion here, but I want on the record that something more needs to happen. Whether or not staff can come back with some ideas on how we can start enforcing some of the, it just says inspector in here, so maybe we could deem somebody an inspector and go around in the 5 or 6 buildings that we all know are vacant, maybe enforce the bylaw that we have on the record.
You could also, that individual could also issue traffic tickets for parking and things like that, could they not?
There's a long list of.
It's up to council then. I don't know how we sort of go forward from this, but whether council wants to request staff to look into the process of hiring a bylaw and complaints officer, or whatever the proper terminology is.
I would suggest, at the very least, we can make an attempt. And I don't want to sound like I'm kicking the can and we're going to make an attempt for show, but I don't believe it's ever the right decision to hire someone just for the sake. So if we can put the job ad out, see if we can find someone that we think will be suitable, then I'd suggest we do that again, and see how that process works.
Could we go down the contract road that we sort of said that we were gonna go down and then backed off, and then said we were gonna go down and back off?
Yeah, no.
Could we finally look at that, and maybe when we do go down that road, we can keep it very focused on what we expect them to do at the start to clean up some of these bylaw lingering properties or issues that we continue to have?
Are you referring to the private contractors within the province who offer bylaw enforcement services?
Yeah, there was tons of meetings, the former police chair and so on. At one point, we were ready to go down that road, and then we couldn't. We were gonna hire internally, and then we were gonna go down that road, and then no, we're hiring internally again. So and I know I'm not trying to be hard, Gordon, but I feel like we'll try again, and then you just said we get to October and then the cycle starts again. So I spoke about it for 4 years, and I'm getting tired of talking about it, but it does mean a lot to the residents that are affected by it, and I say this over and over again. The people that have to either live by it, or businesses that are around it, or just for the sake of our downtown and certain buildings, it has a major effect on how people look at your city. So I feel strongly about it, and I feel we need to really give it a good effort.
And rest of council, are you all in agreement? Yeah. All right, let's kick the can. No, not kick the can. We can. No, sorry, wrong analogy.
Certainly we will. We're in the process of hiring a new director of HR and legal services. We don't have to wait for that process to end to start this process, but I would just say we will certainly attempt to do that. The same HR contract negotiation, bargaining unit issues still remain. That doesn't mean they're unresolvable, but we will certainly attempt to hire a bylaw enforcement officer.
And could they also maybe work in the complaints piece that Councillor McColeman was talking about? If there's an avenue to try and again relieve.
If we have a new person hired and designated, then we will create a new process where they certainly won't come all through my office every day. But again, a process is only as good as everyone's willingness to follow it, right? Once we start deviating from the process, things become more challenging. But
great, thanks, Councillor Snow.
For clarification, if I may, just since we're wrapping this up. So whenever the issue is coming in, say from a resident, our first goal is to try and get them to complete the form, right, to the CAO?
that's the
Preferred,
preferred approach, certainly, right?
preferred,
There's a form,
yeah.
there's bylaw form, it's on the website, it's easily searchable.
Yeah.
If somebody can't print it off, they can come in and get one from Sandra, fill it out, bring it into Sandra. That's how
And
the
I think-
process starts.
And what I'm trying to say, when somebody is calling and it is a senior or it is somebody with young children or whatever, that to them, that's a layer. And I think that's why a number of layers, they go to their counselor. So what I'm saying, I can't speak for my fellow counselor colleagues, but I try to cover all the bases to make sure that the CAO, the mayor, the department, or the representative are aware, because there's nothing worse than finding about it after the fact, if they don't know, and it's their duty or ward or whatever. But I think from looking at it, that's something that we need to kind of work that out as to who, like, I'm trying to talk to you, but try to send it to the CAO and then know what we're supposed to do, I guess. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. I mean, my request to councillors would be when you get that call, you point people towards the website. Here's where the form is. I've sent you all the link to the form that you can go back and send that again. And if the process starts that way, it's much smoother. And it's certainly easier for whomever's enforcing it, whether it's a new person or whether it's the police. There's a complaint that we can follow up on.
And I don't want to belabor it, but I will say this, there is a difference between the elected official and staff, and I mean that with respect, because most residents are very quick to tell us, I know they've told me, you're my counselor and I want you to deal with it. That's what I hear, so that's what happens.
And if I could just add to that, I did have a couple of incidents in the last few weeks, and I asked for those forms, and no way. They didn't want to be identified or anything like that. So we dealt with it another way. So anyway.
It's not dissimilar to, I mean, the police, somebody calls the police with a complaint, and again, Chief, you jump in here, I don't want to say anything incorrect, but somebody calls the police with a complaint and says, I don't want to give you my name, but da-da-da-da, right? There's not often a lot the police can do.
So if somebody calls the police, this is an over-exaggeration, of course, but somebody calls the police and says, somebody's running down Granville Street with a knife, I'm not gonna give you my name, the police are not gonna just be like, no, you didn't tell me your name. So, in theory, like, that's the struggle. It does put neighbor against neighbor at times, and I've had lots of people similarly saying, you know what, I don't wanna fight with my neighbor, it might have to go to court. I think there's actually something on the form that says this might be used in legal proceedings.
And they're scared.
And that sort of defeats the purpose of this whole thing is not to get anybody in trouble, not to create enemies. It's just to clean up the neighborhood, make people follow the rules. Like it. So I think we do add way too many layers to it and make it difficult. So I don't know. We're not kicking the can down the road. We're gonna move on it. So.
Great, well, we'll try. We'll try and get a bylaw and complaint officer person to help make this process better for the residents of our community. Moving on, item 8, we're getting there, folks. Parks bylaw enforcement. This is just with respect to the item here on the agenda. Expectation, at least, there's certainly some potential for increased number of individuals living in our community unhoused, particularly come summer, as some of the provincial units move back onto market, basically from individuals who, for the past number of months, have been living in hotels and motels in the city, and some of those units are now moving back to their commercial purposes, which is putting an increased strain once again on an undersupplied housing market that I know we are working hard to get more supply into. So the sort of the question we have is, one is to make sure we have a sort of coordinated response with respect to how we are dealing with the provincial government. I think Council has discussed before the urgency and the need to make sure that there are spaces and places for people, as well as the wraparound services that they need, so those who are unhoused have suitable temporary accommodations. We have a limited number of those in Summerside, if any. And we wanted to make sure that ultimately we don't want to have, it's not good for anyone to have people living in tents in parks. It's not good for people to be living in tents to begin with. And it's not good for our community spaces to have people living in tents where there's children's programming and people going to enjoy those park spaces. So trying to get ahead of this to a degree. The CAO has spoken about, we spoke earlier about reaching out both to the both provincial ministers to identify this as a concern in our community, the lack of temporary and emergency shelter spaces. We're just sort of putting this on the agenda to let our community know that we are concerned about it. We're concerned about those residents who are unhoused or potentially unhoused in the future, and going to try everything that we can do to make sure that they get these services from the provincial government, because ultimately that's who provides these types of wraparound services and emergency shelter housing, not cities, to step up and try and meet that need. So I wanted to have a brief discussion if there's anything more to add that we haven't already discussed. Okay, so we will follow up with provincial ministers and MLAs to identify this as an issue. We have heard from police services about it as an issue, and ultimately the most important piece is the residents in our community who we want to make sure have a proper roof above their head and a safe space for them as individuals or them as families. And we'll do everything we can to be pushing that and be alert and aware of it and try and get ahead of it before the situation gets tougher. And it might, and it probably will, and we'll sort of have to figure that out as we go. But okay, great. We'll move on now to item 9. This is the Summerside Sustainable Tourism. It says initiative here. That's incorrect. It's Industry Inc. Or SSTI. SSTI was formed, I think, in 2003 as a not-for-profit company with the CAO of the city on as a director. SSTI received money from the city year over year for a number of years. I think in total, between 2003 and 2015-16, approximately $1.6 million, almost sort of $200,000 a year. SSTI conducted projects in and around the city, including the boardwalk, which is a fabulous addition to our city, the redevelopment of the Shipyard Market. A number of months ago, or no, not a number of months, now weeks, the current directors of SSTI, who are the same directors as I understand for the past 8 years, approached the city looking for some direction on where they would go next or what the city thought they should be doing next to a certain extent. The city has not provided funding to SSTI since 2016. In approximately 2011, 2012, the annual, I don't know if it was a grant, Kristen, or not, but annual $200,000 went down to 100, went down to 16, and that was it. The SSTI has 3 directors on it. They asked for our thoughts. We had a discussion, Deputy Snow and I, CAO, Deputy CAO, I think Deputy CAO was there. Our general thought and request to them was one to simply, in effect, we wanted to get the Shipyard Market space into a commercial sector or out of their hands, because they were sort of looking at what do we want to do next. It is, I guess, within their purview to a degree. We certainly have some connections to what happens with SSTI through a land sale arrangement that the previous council was part of with SSTI, between SSTI and the city with respect to the land under the Shipyard Market. So I wanted to sort of put this out here because it has been, I've heard about it for years. What goes on, who owns the Shipyard Market, what's happening there. It was a positive discussion about the role that SSDI played in some important projects in the history of our city. There certainly was a different time. There was a time, as at least 2 councillors here would remember, and the rest of us would have read about in books. Not online, before the internet, where sometimes other funding from other levels of government didn't go directly always to municipalities, so organizations that the city had some involvement in. Part 2 company could be useful for leveraging additional funds from other levels of government. Today, I think it's fair to say that the federal and provincial governments, when they provide funding for economic development projects, we also have an economic development department here, prefer those funds go through municipalities. And that's sort of been the course for a while, and probably one of the reasons why projects haven't moved forward there. Now, SSTI has continued to operate the Shipyard Market. So I wanted to sort of put that out there. This has sort of been hanging around. It is not something we went out sort of looking for. We sort of were approached and are in discussions as to what sort of our position is for them moving forward.
Kristen, I think we said there was no, the last grant was around 16,000, something like that. But were we not on the hook for some of the renovations to?
That was in a prior year.
Okay.
That we contributed to renovations.
Yeah.
I thought it had something to do with the land.
We
Some
did.
of the land,
Yeah.
city land.
Yeah. There's, yeah.
City land? Oh.
We sold the land underneath the building to
Yeah.
them in 2020.
They owned the building, we owned the land, or
Yes.
something like that. Anyway, I thought we contributed to the renovations because the floor had all gone and all that stuff.
They used.
I think we were on the hook
They used our
for.
grant for that, for a contribution to that.
Good, that was part of the grant?
Yes,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, thank you.
yes.
Yeah, so, Dan stated, we met with them, and like Dan, or his worship mentioned, it's my understanding that they are basically coming to the end of their service, which has been many years of great service, got lots of great projects done. But I think the time has come where it has met its purpose, and currently it needs to probably get back into the city's hands and move the projects along, similar to other projects in the downtown, where I think there comes a time where things have to move along for the betterment of the city, and I believe this is one of them. We had a great meeting the other day. I think the last it left was that we were gonna go our separate ways and come back together with a sort of final decision, but my hope is that we're able to move forward in a positive direction and see some great things happen there, and I thank them for their many years of doing great work and getting some really good projects done, but it's been probably, I don't know, a significant amount of time before any work on their end has been done in regards to projects, so yeah, just with them wanting to move on from there, which I understand. I think I told them the other day in the meeting, being somebody that's been on boards for many years, after you're on a board for so long, just the natural progression is new board members move in, you move on. Just being on any board for way too long is not good for anybody, so yeah, so that's all I have to say.
I guess just the last then, just so hearing right from council, I don't think council has any interest in providing further grants to SSTI in the future. Is that correct?
Those decisions are usually decided on budget presentations and stuff like that, right? but I hear what you're not saying. Yeah, that's normally what we do through the budget process, or yeah. And I'm not sure where we go from here.
I think that one thing that we do have, with respect to the sale of the land to SSTI, one of the clauses in there was that the city was able to appoint a director to the SSTI board. We have not done that. I think we should look at that as a consideration. Again, historically, this organization had the former CAO of the city on its board, and continues to do so. I've never sat on a board for 20 years, but it doesn't mean that you can't, with the intent of getting projects done here in the city. I think it would be probably appropriate to appoint our CAO to the board, if we have the ability to do that, and to continue to work with SSTI basically to get, to get any other potential spaces that they have developed and a path forward where people aren't sitting in limbo. But we only have so much control over the situation.
I guess just the one question that crops up in my mind is, when we last had the presentation with the current members, I think there was also some discussion. There is a private owner or a private person that either rents or whatever that has a restaurant. I don't know what that arrangement exactly was. So I guess I'm just feeling a little bit kind of wondering, should we be talking about this? Because I don't know what those arrangements were, whether it was bought or whether it was a long-term lease.
I guess what it'd be fair to say, and cut me off if I say anything I shouldn't before I say it, but in our meeting the other day, just tell me to be quiet, but in our meeting the other day, because you brought it up, there obviously is a tenant currently using that facility. In the meeting the other day, both sides agreed that we were not going to negatively impact that person this coming season, or, you know, where things are status quo for right now. We're looking at a path forward.
I guess the only thing that I will say to it, and I think it's really important. I've been going through a lot of old clippings and things like that, and I found whenever the Shipyard Market was first open, the concept of that development was to have other commercial businesses, other activities, other things happening. And I say this with respect. I know that it's busy in the summer, but personally, I think to not see it utilized, I'm sorry I have my back to you folks, to not see it utilized year-round. Because to me, I look at that as like a four-season asset that, you know, if the partnerships or the, you know, the directorship or whatever you want to call it was involved, I just hate to see things not happening there all year long, because it's a prime location. When it shuts down, it shuts down. Even when people go to the washroom, it's shut down.
I think there's some more good conversation to take place around this item, and I wouldn't mind if we could move it to the Finance Committee. We're having on May 10th? Krista? Yes. Yeah, May 10th. So we could add it to the agenda for the Finance Committee. I'd appreciate that. Is that okay with council?
I'll be okay with that. Maybe at the outcome there, we can have a letter penned from mayor and council to the board as to what sort of we would like to see, or what our expectations or understandings are of the various agreements. And
good.
That would work.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay with council?
Thanks.
Okay. That's it. Anything else? Are the Leafs going to win again tonight? Do they play tonight? No. We do have an in-camera session, so we will just take a quick 5-minute recess, and then we'll complete the in-camera piece that we started at the beginning